In this short video, I'm going to go over a few things you need to know for the first week of British Lit 1. These are just a few things that give you a contextual background of what's going on and why we should study British Lit. So in these slides, you'll see that I read the slide directly or I'll speak off the cuff. So what is the significance of British Lit? So during the 1,000 years between the end of Roman occupation of Britain and the War of the Roses, England emerged as the dominant political entity on the island of Britain. The development of the English government produced a country that was more orderly and more responsive to public opinion than any other state in Europe. The achievement of England's monarchy and of its critics, who continually spurred it toward acknowledging the will of the people, laid the foundation for the powerful state that would found the American colonies in the 17th century and dominate the globe in the 18th and 19th centuries. To the right is a painting of King George II. He is the father of King George III, who was the king when we had our American Revolution. So we're studying the medieval ages, which is about the 5th century after the fall of Rome to the 15th century, where we see Chaucer here on the left write the Canterbury Tales, and we start to see the rise of a middle class. So Britannia, and it's called Britannia at this time, not Britain. Later on, it takes on the name Britain, experienced enormous changes, historical, social, and linguistic. We see these barbaric tribes start to become more orderly, choose a leader, develop common laws. We see Christianity come to the land in about the 6th century. We see the language changing from this ancient English language to the Germanic Old English. Then we see the French come in when William of Normandy invades England in 1066. By the way, 1066 will be on the exam, so you'll need to know that. We'll talk about it again later. But that's William of Normandy brings French. They speak French, the aristocrats. So the dominant society there is French speaking, and the peasant society are speaking Old English. So that is why when you're sitting at the table speaking French, your food is called veal, or veal, and the veal out in the pasture with the peasants who speak Old English, they call it a cow. So those are some of the changes that are occurring during this time period. So why do we study British Lit and history? For one, whatever your ethnic heritage may be, we are all heirs of the medieval England in one way or another. So there are several reasons why we study British Lit and history. One interesting area to study is the law. It's very common to our own American law. In Great Britain, or Britannia, after King John signs the Magna Carta in 1215, we see a more established formal set of laws. The rule is not arbitrary, nor is it absolute. King John couldn't just arrest you for any reason he wanted, which he would have done, and thrown you in prison. You had to have broken a law, and you were entitled to a trial by jury. Does that sound familiar? And they had a representative government after the signing of the Carta, and it's the world's oldest, called Parliament. It was based on a common law that had evolved over time, a declaration of human rights. They had taxation without representation. Again, that sounds familiar. They had the rights of the individual, and they had the right to bear arms. So these are all laws that were that evolved after the Magna Carta, or came about because of the Magna Carta in 1215, and greatly influenced our own American government and law. Another reason is the arts, which evolved during this period in tandem with and as a result of the following forces: political, social, economic. For example, King Arthur, he changed from the 6th century to the 12th century to the 15th century, and as well did Robin Hood. So these legends and these stories, they evolve. So King Arthur in the 6th century is very different than the King Arthur of the 12th century. The King Arthur of the 15th century is more Christian. We'll see this when we watch the movie Excalibur and we read Mallory's version of King Arthur. We'll look at the struggle between the changing society of paganism to Christianity. The language changed. The English is a mongrel language. It's a legacy to Britain's invaders. So English is German. It's Low Germanic, so that might pop up on exams. There's High German and Low German. The English that we speak is based off Low German. There's Old Norse, which it has greatly contributed to the English language with the pronouns that start with th, the ith, the thee, them, they, this, and their. Those are all Old Norse words. In German, we have words like clothes, but in French, we have words like garments. So when William the Conqueror, sorry, my mind's going blank, conquers England in 1066. That year will be on your exam. He brings French to the British society. So the ruling class then was French-speaking, and the peasant class were speaking Old English. So quickly we'll look at some time frames. In the 5th century, we have, living in Britannia, Angles and Saxons, called Anglo Saxons, and they invade Britannia and take over the south and east. So at the right here, you see a map, and you see the Jutes, the Angles, the Saxons, and the Frisians with lines drawn over to the areas they invade and settle. They intermarry, they have children, and they become citizens of Britannia. The native Britons took to the north and the west. To the north there you see Picts. That is what we come to know as Scotland. In the 11th century, the Danes conquered Britannia. They were a northern Germanic tribe inhabiting what we now know as the Kingdom of Denmark. In 1066, William of Normandy conquers England, and for 4 centuries, French rule politically and culturally. 1485, we have the beginning of the Tudor dynasty. And it's one small province now poised to create an empire that would span the entire world. This is where we get King Henry VIII, and from then on we have descendants of the Tudor dynasty ruling England. So we go from the fall of Rome in the 5th century, which begins the Anglo Saxons, which begins Britannia climbing through the years to become a really strong and powerful nation, especially under Queen Elizabeth, who builds the national navy. And then we have the Reformation, which is a religious movement in the 16th century that started by Martin Luther and the beginning of Protestantism and break with the Catholic Church. We have the Renaissance, or the Renaissance, pronounced both ways. It's the rebirth and revival of Latin and Greek learning and literature, 14th to 17th century. So, as Dr. Paxton, a history professor, says, this is a story of the successful creation of a sense of nationhood among a diverse group of peoples. We have an 800-year period of time, beginning with Caedmon's hymn, to the accession of King Henry VII and the beginning of the Tudor dynasty. Between the fall of Rome and the War of the Roses, England emerged as the dominant political entity on the island of Britain, more orderly and more responsive to public opinion than any other state in Europe. In the painting there to the left is King Henry VIII.